Hi friends, my name is Andrew Connard. I'm the pastor at Susanna Wesley United Methodist Church, and today we are taking a look at the next chapter in our Leader Development Book Club. We are reading together the book Canoeing the Mountains, Christian Leadership in Uncharted Territory by Tod Bolsinger. If you want to take a look at some of my reflections from the past weeks, you can do that on our YouTube channel, and I invite you to subscribe so that you can get connected with all the updates as they come in the days ahead. Today, we're taking a closer look at Chapter 10, The Mission Trumps, and we're using, throughout this book study, a framework that helps us engage the text, and that involves three symbols. The first is a question mark, and this is a place in the text where you discover an answer to a question that you have, or a question that you didn't know that you had. It's when you learn something new. Second symbol that we're using is a sun or a light when it sheds perspective on what's going on in our lives as a congregation, or when something in your life sheds perspective on what the author is suggesting or sharing in the text. Finally, the third symbol is the arrow. That gives guidance and direction. It points a way ahead for some action steps that we might take together or by ourselves to make progress in the days ahead. So for Chapter 10, The Mission Trumps, I found the question mark really right there in the first few paragraphs of this chapter. He writes this: "Leadership is disappointing your own people at a rate they can't absorb," writes Heifetz and Linsky, quoting another author. "This painful truth brings us to the heart of the necessary adaptive capacity to lead transformational change in uncharted territory, disappointing people." Disappointing people at a rate they can absorb is a skill that requires nuance. Disappoint people too much and they give up on you, stop following you, and may even turn on you. Don't disappoint them enough, and you'll never lead them anywhere. Now, this is an answer to a question that I didn't know that I had. What is the appropriate, how to engage leadership? As I'm seeking to live into God's call in my life, seeking to lead Susanna Wesley in a way that can help us make progress for the future, disappointing people is not something that comes to my mind. I want to be a part of people's lives in a meaningful way and not disappoint people. And yet, not disappointing people means that perhaps I may not be leading in an effective way, may not be leading us towards what God is calling us, and disappointing people at a rate that they can absorb. That's the key here, right? Trying to find, what does that look like? How do we stay focused on the mission, not disappointing people so much, but also not disappointing them, avoiding not disappointing them at all, because that would not help us make progress. We would never be going in any direction. So that was the first part of this text, and it leads to the second part, the sun, the light that gives a perspective on what's going on in my life and in our life as a congregation. Tod Bolsinger writes these words: "Leadership isn't so much skillfully helping a group accomplish what they want to do. That is management. Leadership is taking people where they need to go and yet resist going." Now, that is an interesting perspective on the life of our congregation. When I think about my role, or perhaps when you think about your role as a life of a leader, part of what we want to accomplish is something that we already recognize that we want to do. There are things that we identify. Maybe you have some ideas about what you would hope for Susanna Wesley in the days ahead. And that's really important. I have some ideas too, and we want to make sure that we want to try to live into those, but that's not really leadership. That's not leading us into uncharted territory. It might give us a picture of some actions that we might take to something that we might already foresee, but that's not helping lead to where God would have us to go. Because this idea of taking people where they need to go and yet resist going, that is where God might be leading us. I think of the people of Israel who, when they were halfway through the wilderness, they said over and over, "Don't you wish that we could be back in Egypt?" And yet God was leading them to something greater and more meaningful and significant for their people than even they could imagine. It was easy to imagine what life was like in the past here at Susanna Wesley and say, well, if only we could go back to there, or that's perhaps an outcome that we might have in mind for us for the future. But I believe that God may be calling us, and this moment in our time is calling us into something new and different and even more significant. Now, I don't know what that is, but I think the process is what is important. This is what I've been discovering as we've been reading this book together. The process of learning adapt to the world around us, not only from the pandemic, but also our culture as it's changed over the past months and over the past years, is part of our faithful work together as a congregation. Finally, the arrow that I think really provides some right on, spot on guidance for us as a congregation is getting clear about conviction. They ask these three key questions that any organization might ask to help them get at what is it that is most important for them to gain clarity on what they are convicted about. The first question, what are we passionate about? What are we passionate about? The second question, what do we have the potential to do better than anyone else? What do we have the potential to do better than anyone else? And finally, what will pay the bills? And where those three questions come together, Bolsinger writes, for Collins, when leaders develop the deep understanding of how these three come together, they develop a clear core conviction that is expressed in the core ideology, the mission statement, and through the strategic priorities that will enable us to accomplish our mission and live out our values, where those three come together. And I don't know that we have that clearly identified yet at Susanna Wesley. What is our reason for existing? We talk about it in this way. I've been talking about it in this way. We build diverse Christian communities where God's love is in action. And I think that begins to address maybe one or two or maybe some angles of those three, but maybe not for everyone. Maybe not every person that's connected with Susanna Wesley has some sense that, yes, this is who we are. This is why we're doing it. This is who God is calling us to be. This is how we are to make a difference in our community in this time and place. And I think that's a place that requires some additional work for us to really gain clarity to answer these three questions. Where is it that we can all gain conviction around our existence, about what God is calling us to, about what we're all doing, spending our time leading and sharing our time and our energy and our resources? I think that we have a great opportunity here to gain clarity as a congregation about our core convictions, our core ideology, and then being able to use that as a guide for the future, a guide to make decisions. As Bolsinger writes, he shares about an organization that requires grant applications to write a simple proposal with an 8-word mission statement. The statement must be in this format: verb, target, outcome. Now, we have more words than that in what we call our mission or a vision statement today, and I think we have the opportunity to continue to clarify that, maybe to revisit it, maybe to shorten it, make it so crystal clear that we can make decisions based on it to help us decide, are we going to do this or are we going to do that? And I believe when we get there, we'll have made some real progress in helping our organization live into God's mission for us in this uncharted territory of 2021 and the years ahead. I'm so glad that you've joined us for this Leader Development Book Club. I hope that you continue reading through Canoeing the Mountains by Tod Bolsinger, that you take a moment to share this content with others if you find it meaningful, and especially share it with others here at Susanna Wesley. Thanks for connecting today, and I'll see you again soon.